and it's really hard to print things off it. It gets me very frustrated. It's just like me, it's just old and tired, and it's time to get a new one. So I'm going to read it off my tablet tonight. So hopefully, my mind sometimes goes much farther ahead than my words do, so that's why I like a sheet of paper, because I can look down here. I can only look at so many sentences at a time, but we'll struggle through. We'll get through it. If you've never prepared a message, you don't understand what it takes to prepare a message. And I couldn't do this week by week. It's just too cumbersome. I just don't have the gift, I guess, to do that. And I have to live with these for weeks at a time to be able to, chew on it and get it through. But as of yesterday, I had nothing for tonight. And then yesterday morning, I meet once a month with an old high school friend of mine for coffee, and we talk about the world as it is, and the world as it's supposed to be, and politics, and he's a devout Catholic, but I believe he's saved, because he says all the right words. He keeps telling me, I like meeting with you because you're like me, you're all a believer. You believe the same way I do. Even though, I come to a Bible preaching church, and he still goes to the Catholic church, and I invite him every time I preach, and it's like, well, I get out of my Catholic church around 10:30, it's just, I can't make it. So, but anyway, so when we got back, this message kind of hit me. We're going to talk out of Daniel about what it's like to live in an ungodly world. I mean, this world today is becoming less godly every day. And it's hard. I mean, God's been taken out of the schools, he's been taken out of the government, he's been taken out of the court system, even though our laws are based on Judeo-Christian beliefs. But yet they've taken, and there's bills being passed now to take under God out of the Pledge of Allegiance and God we trust out of our money. So the world is doing everything it can to take God out of our society. And I wish I wrote these statistics down, but as I was researching things yesterday, I came across, I can't remember the website, it's called Surveys for Churches or something like that, and it just does simple surveys like, do you say grace, do you regularly attend church, that. And my generation, which is, I'm the end of the baby boomers generation, and like 71% my generation associates themselves with some type of religion. Now it's like 35% of this current generation associates themselves. So the numbers are being reversed. And I kind of blame my generation for that, because obviously if we taught our kids correctly, this next generation would have hopefully carried the torch. But church attendance is down, liberal views are up, the sanctity of life is being questioned right now, crime is on the rise. It's not that sin is different now than it was 2,000 years ago, it's just more readily available, I guess is the way I want to phrase it. Daniel lived in a time like this, transported from Israel to Babylon and living in a godless society. And we're going to learn some lessons from Daniel. 3 stands that we need to take today. But before we get there, I want to read Galatians 5, 19 through 22, and it says, Now the works of the flesh are evident: sexual immorality, impurity, sensuality, idolatry, sorcery, enmity, strife, jealousy, fits of anger, rivalries, dissensions, divisions, envy, drunkenness, orgies, and things like this. I warn you, as I warned you before, that those who do such things will not inherit the kingdom of God. For some people, this is just a typical Saturday night. If you listen to people today, and the internet, you can do good things on the internet, but for me, the internet brings more bad than it does good. I mean, it brings all of these things into people's lives that were never there before. At the flip of a switch, you can, now you can order alcohol just brought to your house. You don't even have to go out anymore. There's prostitution on the internet. It's all just right there at a click of a button. So the 3 things we're going to do. We're going to talk about Daniel, the 2 stands we're going to take. And the first one we're going to talk about is a stand against compromise. And that's Daniel chapter 1, verse 8. And it says, But Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the king's food or with the wine that he drank. Therefore he asked the chief of the eunuchs to allow him not to defile himself. One thing that can harm our Christian life, obviously, is compromise. We've talked about this before. Daniel and his friends took a stand not to eat the meat sacrificed to the Babylonian gods. because it violated God's commandment. In the Levitical laws about eating meats that were offered to idols, or that the blood wasn't completely drained from the meat, whichever the case was, it violated the Levitical laws. And Daniel established his convictions as a young person. His conviction was not to violate the Word of God. And that conviction benefited him not only at that time in his life, but through the rest of his life. And the old saying is that if you don't stand for something, you're going to fall for anything. And Daniel, as a young person, decided to make a stand against compromise. And there's a story of a guy who could not decide which side he wanted to fight for during the Civil War. So he put on the coat of the North and the trousers of the South, and guess what happened? He got shot on both sides. In the book of Revelation, Jesus warned the church at Pergamos about compromise. In Revelations 2:14, he says, "But I have a few things against you. You have some there who hold the teaching of Balaam, who taught Balak to put a stumbling block before the sons of Israel, so that they might eat food sacrificed to idols and practice sexual immorality." When we refuse to compromise, God is with us. In Joshua 1:9 it says, "Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened and do not be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go." Daniel was blessed by God for taking a stand against compromise. I believe God will bless us if we also take the same stand. The next one we're going to look at is Daniel chapter 3. Verses 4 through 6 I'll read. But the next stand that needs to be taken is not only a stand against compromise in today's world, but a stand against idolatry. We must stand against idolatry in today's world. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refused to bow and worship the image that Nebuchadnezzar had made. In verse 4 it says, "And the herald proclaimed aloud, you are commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages, that when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, you are to fall down and worship the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And these three men were faithful to the commandment, thou shalt not have any other gods before them." You know the rest of the story. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were brought before the king, asked to do it again when the sound of the music came. They still refused to bow the knee, and they were thrown into the fire. The king had made the furnace 7 times hotter than it normally is. And as he was being thrown in, the men that threw him in burned up instantly. And then the king looks in the furnace and he sees a 4th person in there. And they're not harmed, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and they come through the fire unharmed. God is able to take care of us when we pass through the fire or pass through the water. God can take care of us if we are willing to make a stand for him. This is the kind of Christian God is looking for today. We need not be asked to worship a statue today, but there are still other gods that people worship today. Money, jobs, politics, sports, possessions. The list goes on. Anything we put before God is an idol. We must take hold of Ephesians 6:10. Finally, be strong in the Lord and the strength of his might. Most of you in this room, if not all of you, have heard of a man named Steve Jobs. He owns Apple Computer. Steve Jobs, late co-founder and CEO of Apple Computer, displayed incredible drive and creativity. But like all of us, Jobs struggled with idolatry. Surprisingly, his idol wasn't technology, it was food. Jobs' idolatrous relationship to food may have cost him his life. In October 2003, a scan turned up a rare version of pancreatic cancer that is slow growing and consequently almost always curable with prompt surgery. Jobs decided not to have the surgery to remove the tumor. Instead, he kept to a strict vegan diet with large quantities of fresh carrot and fruit juices. For 9 months, as his friends and family pleaded with him to have surgery, Jobs refused. 8 years later, he was dead from the cancer at the age of 56. He was in terminal stage, not of cancer, but of idolatry. He thought food was going to be the thing that's going to save him. False idols will always exact a sacrifice from its worshipers. It may not take your life, like it did for Steve Jobs, but it can take your money, your happiness, and possibly your children. If anybody is a student of the Old Testament, you know that the Israelites sacrificed their children at times when they were involved in idolatry to a god named Moloch, and they would literally sacrifice their children. We may not be doing that today, but our compromise and our refusal to take a stand against idolatry could be sacrificing our children's and our own spiritual lives. And the last stand that we need to take today is a stand against spiritual wickedness in high places. And that's in Daniel chapter 6. Daniel chapter 6 and verse 7 says, all the high officials of the kingdom, the prefects and the satraps, the councils and the governors, are agreed that the king should establish an ordinance and enforce an injunction that whoever makes petition to any god for man for 30 days except to you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions. Well, you know this story again. Daniel went home and continued to pray to God during those 30 days, just like he did always. And eventually, he was taken before the king by violating the Medo-Persian law and was thrown into the lion's den. And again, God saved him from the lion's den because Daniel again took a stand against not only compromise and not only idolatry, but he took a stand against wickedness in high places. Ephesians 6:12 tells us, "For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places." These spiritual forces of evil are still at work and even more active today. We really haven't witnessed persecution as Christians in this country. And as I was reading these statistics, right now, 2 out of 5 Christians in Africa are suffering severe persecution for their faith. 1 out of 6 in China and India or in Asia are suffering persecution. In Western states, Europe and the United States, we really haven't seen that kind of persecution. And I wonder if it's because if God knows that if we were to suffer that kind of persecution, we'd probably fail or probably give in this country. I think we've had it too good too long. Or maybe there are Christians like Daniel that will take a stand against compromise, idolatry and spiritual forces. In China, the government keeps tabs on Christians, making sure they don't get out of line, making sure that Jesus doesn't ever conflict with the wishes of the state. Both China and India are increasingly using facial recognition systems with wide networks of cameras to track Christians and make their lives more difficult. It is inevitable that persecution is coming to this country. Student groups like InterVarsity have been kicked off campuses, and a teacher in New Jersey was suspended for giving a student a Bible. A football coach in Washington placed on leave for saying a prayer on the field at the end of a game. He was suspended for 7 years before the Supreme Court took that case and ruled that it was unconstitutional for them to lose his job over that. And it wasn't that he was gathering people to pray. He would go out to the 50-yard line after a game, win or lose, and just kneel and pray quickly and leave the game. And because of that, it offended people in the school committee, and they suspended him from his job. Traditional evangelical schools like Gordon College and in Massachusetts and King Colleges in New York having their accreditation questioned because of their Christian stands. May we have the testimony of Enoch in Hebrews 11 verse 5. It says, "By faith Enoch was taken up so that he would not see death, and he was not found because God had taken him." Now before he was taken, he had this testimony as having pleased God. May we in our testimony, by taking stands today, please God. Let's pray. Lord, I thank you for this opportunity to speak this evening, Lord, and I just pray that even though the message is short, Lord, that it has an impact on all of us as we think about our lives today, Lord, and what it's going to take to continue to live godly lives. May we all